Peace. What's good? How you doing? This is ZaZaAli. Today is Monday, June 20th, 2022. I pray that this message reaches you all in the best of health, spirit, and mind. This is my Ask Me Anything segment for my private membership channel. I actually sat down last night to record this video. I received a question about chronic fatigue syndrome from one of our members. So I sat down last night to do some research and to record this video. And I actually had wanted to discuss the weather anomalies, specifically the situation with the cows in Kansas. And so I said, I'll do her question since I only got one question this week, and then I'll pose a question to the audience as well. What's up with all of these weather extremes around the world? And then, of course, that opens the door for me to, put part of this video online, obviously to promote the membership channel, but also to promote awareness more specifically, and to get us into a mindset of really opening our eyes and looking at the world, through the lens of discernment. I think the avoidance of truth, avoidance of the things that are taking place on this planet are coming to a head. And so with that as the backdrop, I just wanted to kind of have a conversation, extending the conversation about, what I've been talking about in terms of the trails in the sky, the white trails, and global warming, and just the overall dichotomy of what we're facing on our planet, all of these different extremes taking place. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. The first part of this video will be about weather extremes all over the globe. And then the second part will be about dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome. As always, you can access the full 1 hour video plus all of my exclusive content through my membership channel. And then you can also access some of my content on demand. You can get information about that from my website, ZaZaAli.com. All right. And I'm also going to do a part 2. I did part 1 already talking about solar engineering. I'm going to do a part 2 about that because I know I said I was going to talk about CO2 and how they're using. Imagine we all breathe in and breathe out CO2, and now they're declaring war on CO2 and calling it climate change or global warming. So yeah, these are very interesting times that we're dealing in. But again, I have my Illuminati 2.0, a divine new world order. And I keep reminding myself, and I'm going to keep repeating that, in particular when I talk about conspiracy theory type topics, because I don't present any of this information. I don't research with a fear-based consciousness. So as I talk to you about this and as I bring these things to your attention, it's not from a fear-based consciousness, because I understand that they're using the natural resources of our planet and turning them against the planet and weaponizing it. So if they're using the natural resources for nefarious purposes, we can and should be using natural resources for righteous and divine causes. So hopefully, the last 10 years, as I've been talking about this, because I have continuously, I also wrote a book about weather manipulation and weather modification, among other things. But I've been talking about this subject matter consistently. And hopefully somewhere along the path, I've inspired myself as well as all of the other people who've been screaming about this. Hopefully we are inspiring, the scientists, the people with the engineering minds, people who are into art, agriculture and farming, people that have a natural love for chemistry, a natural love for botany, a natural love for science. Obviously, mathematics has to play a major equation in this, especially when it comes to developing this toxic, chemical concoction that they're spraying in our upper atmosphere. It's all math, it's all science, right? So hopefully all of those kind of mindsets, along with the spiritual priestesses, shamans, the tree huggers, the people that actually love and have a connection to earth, as well as the mom and pops that are thinking and conscientious of this planet and what they're going to leave behind for their children. I know I most certainly am. that's why it's important for me to bring this conversation to you guys, because I am very concerned with the condition of our planet, with the condition of our wildlife, with the condition of our oceans, because my son is going to inherit this world, and his children will inherit the world beyond that. So the African proverb says that we're supposed to be preparing for 7 generations behind us. And so, it's interesting. I watched, actually, I'm not even going to get into that because that's going to take me left. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, by the way, side note, if you either purchase the on-demand video for My Kingdom Within Part 1, if you're part of the LA crew that I sent it to, shout out to all of you guys and much love for your patience. Or if you are a part of my membership channel, there was a video at the end of the presentation that talked about nanotubes, but for some reason it didn't pick up. The sound was muffled and disoriented. So I went ahead and uploaded that video, as well as the video from one of the doctors that was talking about the medical compound. I don't want to actually say the name, but the medicine that they have been giving for the last 2.5 years to people in hospitals as a result of being diagnosed with CVD-19, which was basically the prelude to murdering these people. I put that full video up. If you purchase the on-demand video, if you have access to the page for the people who went to the event from LA, or if you are part of the membership channel, I put both of those videos up so that you guys can be able to listen to them, in their full context without the issues with the sound disorientation. All right. So, premier globalist think tank Club of Rome's quote from the first global revolution of 1933, quote, "Divided nations require common enemies to unite them, either a real one or else one invented for the purpose. Because of the sudden absence of traditional enemies, new enemies must be identified. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself." This is profound on 2 ends of the spectrum. Obviously, this is exactly what they're doing right now in the first part of this quote. For me, it's not even conjecture, or not conjecture, but conspiracy at this point. I have seen and read and watched hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of content, of data, and then just looking up in the sky with my own 2 eyes to know that this is actually happening. And like I've been talking about, this inversionary, tactic of Satan or the devil, and this scarcity or lack-based consciousness, and having us actually believe in lack and in food shortages and in water shortages, when the planet is wired, again, like we are wired for well-being, which I talked about in the other video. So is the planet. And the whole between the daytime and the nighttime cycle, when when the sun is shining in the daytime, and then the transition to nighttime, and then the moon shines, the bacterial process, the fungal process, the death process, everything about this planet has a recyclical or recycling nature about it. So even when you deal with farming, you take compost, which is the quote unquote trash, or the remnants of food that you've already eaten, but the parts that you can't digest or you can't eat, and you take that and then you turn it into a compost, which regenerates the soil, which creates new life, right? So all of this global warming, climate change, water shortages, famine, all of it is a part of this agenda. And in order for us, now talking about this from a spiritual vantage point, and even referencing the quote, right, the real issue, the real enemy being humanity itself, one of the real, I should say, points of emphasis or focuses, like I said in the beginning, not just the engineers and the agricultural farmers and the scientific minds and the chemists and the biologists, but also the shamans and the healers and the spiritual minded, people, brothers and sisters. These are the people going back to that divine connection, that divine, natural sort of love experience with the planet. These are the people that we're going to need, because the science of what they've done and what they're doing, just in terms of can we apply chemistry, can we apply science, can we apply biology to sort of shift this trajectory? The answer is 100%. I don't know. I don't think any of us know, because the level of damage that they've done. So there's going to have to be, well, let me say, so with that being said, I don't know, then that's when the people who do have inquisitive, curious minds for science, etc., step up to the plate now. We don't need to keep having conversations about what's the solution. And sometimes the problem, again, the question is more important than the answer, right? What's up with all of these global extremes? So I pose that question to us, and hopefully the question will, sort of percolate, and it will cause you to be curious about these things, and you to go out and start to pay attention to nature, and to start studying possible remedies, herbalistic or holistic, I should say, holistic, organic, et cetera, remedies in order to take care of ourselves, obviously, but then also, and very importantly, to take care of our planet. So, but the spiritual aspect of this is that we don't know how far the science has taken us, and if there's scientific remedy. So then we have to start falling back on, or not falling back, leaning on and moving towards our energetic resonance. And I'm going to talk about that later in the chronic fatigue syndrome question, in terms of, being able to visualize and to mentally and energetically project health and well-being for yourself as an individual, and then for ourselves collectively as humanity, and then in terms of our planet. Oh, so you're just not gonna play? Why are you just not playing? Okay, let's see. Why is this not playing?
Good evening. It is a weekend of weather extremes. More than 100 million Americans are impacted in much of the lower 48 states. Late today, a suspected tornado ripped through Arkansas. No word yet on damages or injuries. In Colorado today, it feels and looks like winter. But across a swath of the country, it's more like summer. Several cities are roasting and setting new heat records, and it's not even Memorial Day. CBS's Michael George is in a muggy New York City. Michael?
Adriana, good evening. It's near 90 degrees today in Central Park. Add the humidity, it feels more like 100. Across the country, it's a weekend of extremes. It's a scorcher in Washington, D.C. and much of the eastern half of the country. Temperatures 20 to 30 degrees above normal, with records melting away. In the west, Colorado is shivering in record cold, a snowstorm complicating spring and making travel treacherous. This is I-70, traffic reduced to a crawl.
You have 3 weeks of fall, winter, second winter, couple weeks of spring, third winter, and then summer.
The weather was deadly in Michigan. Today, the death toll rose to 2 in Gaylord, the town shredded by a rare tornado Friday. The destruction seen from above today, homes and businesses ripped to shreds, trailers tossed into a pile, Michigan's governor has declared a state of emergency.
This is an extreme weather event. There was not a lot of notice.
To the south, wildfires are the threat. Firefighters in Texas have been battling the mesquite heat fire for 5 days. Donna Housel was able to grab some things from her home near Abilene, unsure what she'll return to.
My heart breaks for the people that's already lost their homes, much less what's still to come.
And the FDNY says one runner died and over a dozen more were hospitalized at today's Brooklyn Half Marathon. It's not yet clear if the heat is to blame, but organizers had warned about the high temperatures. Adriana?
Yeah.
Michael George, thank you.
Is that there have been a lot of athletes dying at
Good evening.
sorry. There have been a lot of athletes dying at events such as this, particularly when they are using a lot of forward momentum isn't the word that I want to use. Using high levels of energy, physical energy, i.e. on soccer fields, on basketball courts. But that's another conversation for another time. That's when we get into part 2 of the Kingdom Within and the Jim Jones juice. The Colorado River states need to drastically cut down their water usage ASAP, or the federal government will step in. This is from June 17, 2022. By the way, the video that we just saw was from April of 2022. During a US Senate hearing on Western drought earlier this week, the commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation told the states in Colorado River Basin that they have 60 days to create an emergency plan to stop using between 2 and 4 million acre feet of water in the next year, or the agency will use its emergency authority to make the cuts itself. For context, the entire state of Arizona is allowed to use 2.8 million acre feet of Colorado River water each year. The Colorado River system supplies water and hydropower to millions of people in the West and is the lifeblood of the 7 states and 30 native tribes in the river's basin. The river system has reached critically low levels amid decades of drought and warming temperatures, which dries out soil that then saps the moisture from snowmelt that would otherwise flow into rivers and reservoirs. And I am posting all of these videos, hoping that the people who watch my content already know that I believe all of this is man-made, weather modification. And I've continuously talked about why I think that's so. I don't want to get into that, but I just want to make sure that as I'm talking about all of these global extremities, that I am very confident that these are all man-made droughts, man-made situations. So keep that in context with, everything else that's happening.
Thousands of cows.
Keep that in context with everything else that's happening on the planet right now.
Thousands of cows in Southwest Kansas dead. The state says extreme weather is to blame. And as KSN's Hannah Adamson found out today, it's a loss of millions of dollars. She spoke to a vet who tried to save the cattle. It's new at 10 tonight. Hannah.
Emily, Dr. Miles Theuer works with 16 feedlots in Kansas, 10 of which were impacted by those extreme conditions over the weekend. He says in his 6-year career in the feed yard industry, he's never seen conditions like this, leading up to what he calls the perfect storm.
I hope I never have to see anything like it again.
For Dr. Miles Theuer, it was a race against the clock Sunday to save his clients' cattle.
Being out there with the crews, it's very demoralizing.
Crews working nonstop to provide extra water, prioritizing pens in need of the most care.
The sad part was that most of these cattle were near the end point of near harvest.
The KDHE says at least 2,000 head of cattle were lost across Southwest Kansas over the weekend, an estimated $4 million loss.
Our normal death losses on a typical month basis, we would be in that 1 to 1.5% range. We're well above those numbers.
The KLA says despite the blow to feedlots, consumers will not be impacted.
This will not create any kind of supply chain issue. They're going to continue to see plenty of beef in their meat case. It should not create a pricing issue.
And despite the rarity of events like this, Dr. Theuer says staying proactive is key.
This was something from a weather event that I mean, hasn't happened in this area, I know, of at least the last 60 years. And so that's how we got to think about that as well in the future.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Experts say while extreme heat and humidity is always a risk, they do not anticipate a similar event that would cause this much damage anytime soon. Here for you, Hannah Adamson, KSN News 3.
Now, notice a couple of things. They kept playing, they didn't show the video of the cows dead consistently. And this is what's, when we talk about having discernment, and when I do part 2 of The Kingdom Within, I'm going to go into mass psychosis and mind control, because when you have discernment, you can recognize that, let's say, for instance, during a George Floyd killing, every time that they went back and talked about the protests, every time they went back and talked about all of the different aspects of the case for however long that whole situation was drawn out, they constantly played the killing of George Floyd over and over and over and over and over, because they want to keep a certain demographic locked in a fear-based consciousness, because they want to keep the fanning the flames of racial hatred and vitriol and ignorance in this country and around the world. They want to keep Black people focused on Black Lives Matter and focused on fighting against racism, white supremacy, because as long as you're doing that, you're not building the kingdom of God. And they want to keep the people that are watching ingrained and deeply involved in fear-based consciousness. Now, juxtapose that with this situation where, for the most part, the images of cows in the background were showing live cows that were eating or that were, being fed with the bottle, that looked like they're in some sort of at least semi-healthy environment. Why wouldn't they play the image of the cows laying dead, supposedly 2,000 of them? I've seen reports that it was upwards of 10,000 now. Why wouldn't they continuously show the image of that, the startling imagery of that over and over? Because they're trying to keep you in a consumer state of mind and not in a logical, your intuition, right? And your sort of common sense from starting to ask a few basic questions, like let's go with their number, 2,000. How do 2,000 cows die in formation? There's the video footage of the guy who's driving past showing these cows, sort of turned over, looking obviously dead. They're like in a formation, like they were practicing for a band recital or rehearsal before they died. That's number one. How, so if it was heat stroke, or, you don't just die instantly if you are overheated. There's a process, you're going to be gasping for air and moving around, sort of trying to find some sort of relief, but you're definitely all not going to be posted in some square, like rectangular, like formation sort of setting. And anybody that sees that video long enough, saw it the first time, and that was the first thing I thought. I've seen it 10 times since. And every time that question gets louder in my head, right? They don't want you thinking logically. They don't want you questioning the narrative. They want you to believe that it was actually the heat that did this, and whether that is the case or not, the jury is still out on that, because that goes to the global warming climate hoax, climate change, trying to watch my language, narrative, which is the next step of this agenda. So they want you from that whole situation, they want you to remember heat. They want you to remember that the planet is turning against itself, and now it's killing its own life form. Because that's basically what they're saying when they talk about global warming, right? And then they also, the fact that they automatically, pinpointed this to heat, there's been no additional, they're not going to do any additional investigation. Why wouldn't you say, we think it was heat, but investigation is still pending because we've never seen anything like this before. So they ought to already automatically have, decided what the outcome of this is. And that's not science. That's not even basic common sense that this world is operating on anymore. They're just telling you things and you believe it. Or you're one of the few and you don't. So automatically she starts talking about the supply chain. Oh, consumers don't need to be worried. It's not going to affect your ability to be able to buy meat. That's how you talk to stupid people. Because for me, if there is a mass die-off, right, and this is something that I put on the table and feed my family, if I have any sort of common sense, even if you tell me that it was the weather, I'm going to say, I might hold off on buying beef. Maybe just we'll take a break for the next month, just so we can wait and make sure that this isn't something, maybe they all ate a bad strain of genetically modified soy or rice, or maybe there was some sort of ailment. Again, we're living in times of peril, right? There's a disease, CVD-19, floating around that's affecting animals, if you believe the narrative. So why wouldn't there be an extra space of, let's be cautious, let's be careful? No, they're trying to regenerate consumer confidence. They're trying to instill consumer confidence in a system that, if you have any confidence in at this point, you should get your pulse checked. And this might be a good time to reconsider the eating of meat. And I don't believe that everybody is supposed to be vegan or vegetarian. I think that human beings have never been a monolithic group. I think that we've come from different areas of the planet, and based on culture, based on climate, based on a lot of different things, determine how those people ate in different periods of history. So I don't think it was. I hear vegans shaming meat eaters; they sound stupid, and I hear meat eaters shaming vegans, and I think they sound really stupid, especially when you see things like this. But now might be a time you might want to consider cutting down on your meat intake. Unless, of course, you believe this narrative, then we got bigger fish to fry. Yellowstone River flooding is a 1 in 500-year event, U.S. Geological Survey says. Unprecedented rain and rapid snowmelt in recent days have caused rivers in parts of Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho to burst their banks, swallowing bridges and sweeping away entire sections of roadway. So we have the Colorado River that's running out of water. And then we have the Yellowstone River that is over flooding. Its banks have been over flooded due to catastrophic flooding. So we see all these extreme polarities in the weather, just like we're seeing all of these extreme polarities in humanity, right? Because Satan has turned everything inside out. So our whole weather pattern, the precipitation process, the jet stream, the way that rain is actually created, there was never any issues for them to go and try to perfect. We started having issues when they got involved. And that's understanding that, man-made weather didn't start earthquakes. It didn't start hurricanes. It didn't start tornadoes. It didn't start storms, right? But again, the system, the ecological system of the earth has natural built-in elements to balance itself out. Just like volcanoes, and I'm going to talk about that later when I get into the chronic fatigue syndrome, but I believe that volcanoes are going to play a pivotal role in nature defending itself from this agenda, what they're spraying in our upper atmosphere. I think that volcanic ash, and that's one of the reasons I'm fast forwarding into what I'm going to get it back into in the Kingdom Within, but the studying of volcanic ash was partially involved with some of the technology that they ended up developing for their Jim Jones juice, but it's also tied to activated charcoal, bentonite clay, which I've been recommending forever and been taking forever, because the bentonite clay naturally, or the volcanic ash, they naturally bond to metal particulates, and then they neutralize them. And the whole system of what they're spraying in our upper atmosphere is based around metal particulates, as well as a lot of the issues. Later, I'm going to talk about autoimmune deficiencies, right? A lot of this stuff is tied to metal particulates in the bloodstream and in the brain. Consequences will be dire. Chile's water crisis is reaching breaking point. This is a June 1st, 2022 article. Unprecedented drought makes water a national security issue as more than half of Chile's 19 million population lived in an area with severe water scarcity by the end of 2021. And of course, we know the indigenous people or the poor people of all of these areas from Chile to California are always going to bear the brunt and are always going to be the ones that suffer significantly. From the Atacama Desert to Patagonia, a 13-year mega drought is straining Chile's freshwater resources to breaking point. By the end of 2021, the fourth driest year on record, more than half of Chile's 19 million population lived in an area suffering from severe water scarcity. And in April, an unprecedented water rationing plan was announced for the capital, Santiago. Again, these are man-made conditions. This is man-made starvation, man-made droughts, man-made, you know what I mean? Like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making people think that he didn't exist, right? I mean, this is it. That is a perfect metaphor for all of this right now, is that it's happening right in front of your face. There's overwhelming evidence to prove that it's happening. And people are so discombobulated. They've taken in so much aluminum and strontium and barium into their brains that their pineal glands are no longer functioning. They are calcified. They're being mentally and emotionally rocked to sleep through predictive programming. But it's all happening right in front of our faces. So again, now we talk about, spirituality versus like real third dimensional reality on the ground, right? This is where the spiritual love and light community has to get off of that trying to pretend like none of this is happening and start really putting on the God, the God level consciousness and awareness to start meditating and praying for our planet to regenerate itself. Because we're past the stage of, it's all going to work itself out. We've been avoiding confronting our internal darkness, which is the whole reason why we're here, the purpose of trial and error of the human experience. We've avoided confronting our darkness for so long that now our darkness is controlling the ship. So if collectively we're not willing to confront this and to address this, then a lot of us are going to be in real serious trouble. California is in a water crisis, yet usage is way up. Officials are focused on the wrong problem, advocates say. Again, blaming human beings. You're using too much, you're doing too much. Why won't you get in line? Sound familiar? Over the last 2 years, beating you over the head because you weren't willing to put poison in your body. Turns out that was the right thing to do. Blaming people for being people. Useless eaters is what they call human beings. Part of the problem is that the urgency of the crisis isn't breaking through to Californians. The messaging around water conservation varies across different authorities and jurisdictions. So people don't have a clear idea of what applies to whom. And they certainly don't have a tangible grasp on how much a 15% reduction is with respect to their own usage. How come instead of spending billions, if not trillions of dollars to tamper with our upper atmosphere and to play God and to try to change the weather, why wouldn't you spend those billions and trillions of dollars and put that into water saline projects and learn how to actually use the natural resources of the planet to our benefit? Our planet is 75% water. There's just no way you will ever be able to sell me on any sort of water shortage. I don't care, the condition of the water based on plastics, based on all of these different variables. Yes, all of those things matter. But if you can find out a way to create fake rain, which they have, I'm pretty sure you can create a high-powered, infrastructure that can turn dirty water into drinkable, clean water. It's not their intention.
The Agenda 2030 is an agenda aiming at a fair globalization. It's an agenda aiming at not leaving anyone behind, eradicating poverty, and creating conditions for people to trust again in not only political systems, but also in multilateral forms of governance and in international organizations like the UN. And indeed, if one looks at the global mega trends, population growth, climate change, food insecurity, water scarcity, chaotic urbanization in certain parts of the world, it is also true that all these mega trends are interacting with each other, are strengthening each other, and we need to recognize that climate change became the main accelerator of all other factors. And as climate change is the main accelerator of all other factors, this is also the moment to clearly say that linked to the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development, there must be a very strong reaffirmation of our commitment to the Paris Agreement and to its implementation with an enhanced ambition, because the Paris Agreement by itself is not enough for the objectives that the world needs in relation to global warming.
So now this is for all of the people who have discernment, whose third eyes are still operating at a high capacity. Now, when you start seeing grants, when you start seeing celebrities and athletes, when you start seeing, pillars of institutions, be it John Hopkins, the World Economic Forum, Cal Berkeley, right? All of these different institutional infrastructures of institution. Is that what I want to say? I think you guys get the point. A lot of their funding, a lot of their language, a lot of their focus is going to be around climate change, because they're creating man-made weather that is going to bring about drought and devastation and famine. If their intention is successful, let me correct myself, because I talked about other people speaking their plan into existence, and I'm not speaking none of that into existence. I'm very, proud to feel strong in terms of my Illuminati 2.0 position, killing the Illuminati, not in any sort of physical way, but we're talking about spiritual transition, spiritual paradigm shifts that's going to move us into a new earth and into the kingdom of God, right? So, but the Agenda 2030, he talked about population, he talked about climate change, he talked about urbanization, he talked about food shortages, he talked about sustainable development. Again, you put a piece of lettuce in a bowl of water, and the head of a piece of lettuce in a bowl of water, and it will grow another head of lettuce without any interference. You put a seed in the ground, you water it, it's going to grow a tree, and it can feed your whole family, right? So this is the whole dichotomy, talking about spiritual warfare, about God gave you everything and the devil gave you nothing, and still was able to trick you. Weather as a force, weather multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. I've been referencing this document, this PDF document, for 10 years now. This is a research paper that was presented to the US Air Force in 2025 by a different list of scientists. And the operational capabilities are to degrade enemy forces. This is talking about using the weather as in weather warfare, using weather modification, precipitation enhancement to flood the lines of communication, reduce PGM or RECCE effectiveness, and decrease comfort level or morale. So they're talking about basically sending storms or using storms in certain areas in order to stop them being able to communicate, right? And then decrease the morale of the soldiers in those areas. Storm enhancement to deny operations, precipitation denial to deny fresh water and induce drought. Did I not just show you 3 or 4 different slides that talked about drought in Chile and California? Space weather to disrupt communications and radar and disable and destroy space assets. This is going tied into Space Force that Donald Trump has been talking about. Well, Donald Trump talked about it during his presidency. Obama talked about it briefly in his. And then, of course, Joe Biden is just, the Antichrist sitting on his throne, playing his position. Do I think he's the Antichrist? Hell no, he's not even. He looks like a carbon copy of a piece of a human being, not even a full human being at this point. But all of these people are just following orders and playing their position. Space radar disrupt communications and radar and disable or destroy space assets. These people are also getting ready for a war with an entity outside of the entities on Earth. Okay. Fog and cloud removal, denying concealment, and make sure, or not make sure, let me just make sure I say this. In terms of what was I just saying about the outside a war with an outside entity? Oh, part of their plan is to use Project Bluebeam in order to either create a fake alien intervention or invasion, or to project a savior, i.e. Jesus or Buddha, within the sky, right? That's a whole nother level, but just something else that needs to be kind of tied into this when we start talking about space weather, and even them building this plasma grid in the sky. It's like a major plasma TV in our sky right now. Fog and cloud removal, deny concealment, increase vulnerability, detect hostile weather activities. They know that there's other countries that have this same technology. China has already, when China had the Olympics, they sprayed and publicly said that they were spraying in order to reduce smog and air pollution, and it was very successful until the Olympics were over, and then it went back to poison in the skies. I was listening to something I was listening to earlier, and the guy was talking about this whole, Agenda 2030 population, and that their goal is to have the population of the elites and then a population of, just regular, very controlled human beings remaining once their agenda is played out. And that the majority of those populations are going to be Asian and Chinese and Japanese people, because they're already highly not, they are already cultivated culturally to be very complacent and submissive to authority, which makes sense. And I'm not judging, Asian people, but if you really understand what's happening in China right now, if you really understand what's happening in China right now and what's been happening in Asian countries for really specifically the last 20, 30 years, yeah, it's a different level of, we like to praise China for being at the economic forefront and technology and all of these different things. But in terms of society and how the people are treated and the forward progress of these cultures in a spiritual perspective or morality, yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired. Enhance friendly forces, precipitation avoidance. Now we're talking about using the weather for our benefit. So the first table is about weaponizing the weather, and then the second table is about using the weather for our benefit, which if we could actually use the weather for our benefit, why would we be facing droughts right now? Or are you using the degradation of the enemy forces against the people that you claim you're supposed to be protecting? Storm modification,